Do you want the microphone?
No, no. Don't do that.
I'm not doing it. You did it. Sorry.
Now, can you hear us? It's probably better for everybody. Perfect. Apologize for that. But I'm still getting feedback. Okay, now we're good. All right. So technology is great, even when it doesn't work. So we now cover 33,000 miles of our state. So it's almost half the geographic area of our state that we provide services. We are geographically sparse. The two areas, we call it the West River. We have two. The majority of our population lives down in the Sioux Falls area, which is blacked out, which we do not serve. But so that's why we went to that model, because it's hard to keep adult ed programs running. And so this is the model we use. Okay, so because we work across 5 offices in a vast area, we've already done a tremendous amount of digital literacy training for our staff. We needed to be able to communicate and collaborate in many different ways. And we needed our staff to feel and work as a cohesive unit. So the budgets in our budget, not only do we not have cleaning ladies or gentlemen, we also don't have IT specialists. So our staff became IT specialists. They can all do basic troubleshooting, some way better than others, but there's always someone in the office that can do things like that. And they've all gotten really good at it. And you know, you ever been to that when you call in because your internet's not working at home and they say, oh, wait, unplug your router. You know, our staff is always like, I already did A, B, and C. Okay. Now we know where to start for troubleshooting. So they can all do that stuff. The focus on digital literacy also included our students. And it's been that way for years. We recognize that there's, you know, where is anyone going to go get a job where they don't need some digital skills? Because they can't even get a job if you can't apply for it online. So we'd already been working on that a lot. I think it's important to give you a demographic snapshot of our students, maybe to help you understand that just a little bit more. So, you know, we focused on that digital literacy. I'm terrible about advancing my screen. So Becky's like, ah! Okay. All right. So just a basic snapshot of us. During 2018-19, you know, prior to COVID, we served 636 students across our region. Now, remember, there's less than 1 million people in our state, and we are serving 25% of them. Our retention rate had been going down for about 2 years. We were at 59%, where before we had always been at a retention rate of 70 to 75% of our students. So we were concerned. And while this was happening, our student base became even more ethnically diverse. Per capita, we're more ethnically diverse than Miami, Florida. It's crazy. Go to Walmart in our town, you're the minority. Me. And considering upper Midwest, that's a surprise for a lot of people. 75% of our students are English language learners, and the vast majority are at the lowest NRS levels. Our AB students usually come to us at the NRS, the intermediate levels of the NRS. So in our GED classes, we were really limited on how much we could provide because of, honestly, the number of staff people we had and the number of students. So we were offering a couple classes in the morning in some locations, a few extra in the afternoons, and one in the evening. So it's kind of was spread out all over the place, as you can see. And that was basically because the majority of our students were English language learners, not GED students. And my 20-hour-a-week staff person that I could afford for GED in Huron only worked in the morning. So that's when we had class. Now our ESL was a whole nother world. We were offering a variety of classes in the mornings, some afternoons, and some evenings. But while we were doing that, some locations had one class and it was a multi-level class, and they had one class all day, period, just one. Other places had morning classes, afternoon, evening. We tried to level them, but even in our best day, we could only offer, like in Huron, we had 4 levels of classes. Well, there's 7 levels of students. So we still had multi-level classes in there. Aberdeen was atrocious. Their growth was happening really, really fast. And they only had 3 levels. So you'd have like, oh, do you think we can do the levels 1, 2, and where do we put 3s? And it was crazy. And so the poor teachers having to deal with all these different levels of students at one time. And I think a lot of you shaking your head, you're like, yeah, it's crazy. So that's what we were wanting. And really it amounted to the student numbers we had, our staff levels on the sites, and the amount of funding we had. I mean, I'd love to have more teachers, but they all want to work for money, and we didn't have any more. So nothing was really wrong, but it wasn't really right either. You know, we were running fine. We were seeing performance gains from our students. We had excellent, qualified, dedicated staff. We were using high quality, evidence-based curriculum. And yet throughout the program, we were left with this nagging feeling that things weren't quite right and we could be doing better. So other than the declining retention rate, nothing else was really showing, you know, like, especially in our post, you know, like those table 5 rates of employment and all those good things. Those were great because they all had jobs. It was easy. It wasn't us. But we knew we could be doing better. I very distinctly remember we have a front reception area in our Huron office, which where I'm located. And every Thursday morning when we didn't have classes, we end up standing in front of that desk and we were like, okay, we got to do something different. We're killing ourselves and we're not meeting our students' needs and we're exhausted. And what are we going to do? Because now we just enrolled 20 new students this week and we don't even have a chair for them. And we had great ideas. But then everybody grabbed their cup of coffee and went back to their room to get ready for next week. There was no time to stop doing what we were doing to try something new. And I would say, you know, it's like, I feel like if we could just stop for a minute, just stop. And then we could figure it out and then we could start again. Well, be careful what you wish for. Yes, COVID hit. When COVID hit, Huron, or the community I was in, was an epidemic hotspot, not only in our state, but yay, we got to be on the national news. So everything shut down. We were locked up. We were a hotbed. And our teachers, you know, all of our teachers in all 5 of our locations packed up their stuff and they went home for a week and then 2 weeks. And in that 2-week period, when nothing was happening, they were all talking with each other via Zoom, on the phone, wherever they could. And they were coming up with a plan on how to serve students. By the end of week 2, they had Zoom classes up and going for our students. They were not great classes. I'll be the first to say. They're the ones that people beat everybody down about, oh, you can't teach online because they were that quality at that moment. But they are going to get better. Which is Becky, where Becky helped us a lot. The one thing I really remember about those Zoom classes is they felt like they were survival mode. You know, Becky says, oh, they weren't great, but they were more like survival mode also for our students, because guess what? Now all of our students were teachers for their children. And they already have a language barrier, 75% of our students do. And now all of a sudden they're supposed to be teaching their student English and math when they don't even understand the instruction themselves. And so that's what our teachers were doing. It was not evidence-based at that moment, but it was the survival mode. And while this is happening, we're actually had the opportunity to think about our program, what it needed, and to take the steps forward. And the work we were doing in our initial Zoom classes helped to show us the way to do that. we realized that we had 5 teachers in 5 locations teaching essentially the same classes at the same time every day. And we realized that that didn't make much sense, not in a communities our size. Wouldn't it be smarter to put all of our students who are at the same level in the same class, even though they're 160 miles apart? Well, more than that. You take Aberdeen to Vermilion, oh yeah, almost 300 miles apart. So if a student, GED student needed a morning class in one group, then we put them all together. Or even better, instead of the old model, which was we had a 4-hour time block in the morning and we always had math, and then we rotated social studies, science, and reading based on the majority of students' needs. If the student had passed the social studies test, well, just don't come to class then. Sorry, that's all we can do to help you. And then all of a sudden, wouldn't it be better if we could level our classes and have a reading class every morning and a social studies class every day? And so then we started thinking about, wouldn't that be great? Or what about all those multi-level English classes? Could we combine the students and level them better so that they could maximize our staff time and give our students the instruction at the levels they all needed? So a culture of collaboration. When I retire, this is what I'm going to be the most proud of. I think I'm an amazing director. Thank you. Not because I have to sign her paycheck either. Oh yeah, believe me, in front of everyone. But no, it's the staff. And if you can empower the people you work with to do what they're passionate about, amazing things will happen. I always think I do not want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to hire the smartest people in the room and then let them do their job. So this was an awesome opportunity to make that happen. What I described is a very condensed version, a very simplistic summary of what actually happened over the course of several months. I don't want to minimize those months. They were hard. But I do want to focus on one of the key successes of the systematic change that we took place. Everything that happened at Cornerstones since March of 2020 has been fueled by the vibrant culture of our staff, not me. Because we cover such a vast geographic area, we've always worked to maintain connections between our staff through weekly staff meetings. They originally came about as conference calls. So you know what my phone bill was back in the 90s? Once a month, long distance calls for everyone, compared to Zoom meetings that were happening every week. We have Zoom meetings. And one of the things that happened as we grew, when it happened, we actually took over other programs that went defunct. And the state just said, oh, well, now you have Aberdeen's NRS reporting system, and you have Erin's reporting system, and you have Yankton's reporting systems. We had 3 different reporting systems. That's Becky's problem, not mine, even though she did complain to me about it. Eventually, we were able to meld them into one. And one of the reasons we did that, because we got tired of hearing the state level people were saying, oh, Cornerstones South, Cornerstones Maine, Cornerstones North. No, we're Cornerstones. Period. And I think the fact that we're like that makes such a big difference in that whole culture of change that came about. So while we're trying to keep our heads above water, and I'm trying to get enough Zoom accounts for teachers and figure out how I'm going to make sure we have enough funding and make all the different entities happy, we're happy. Behind the scenes, the best things were really happening. What happened was we always have made a point of highlighting our individual staff people. We encourage our staff members to let us know what their interests are. You know, what do they want to pursue? What are their passions in adult education, of course? And we let them have opportunities to pursue that. I mean, I will go out of my way to find the funding if somebody's passionate about something that I think will find our program, so that I can make sure they can continue to be passionate about what they want to do. So there's that passion already there. And there's an expertise. to strengthen the skills of the rest of the staff. They were always, there was never like, Susan is never going to learn how to Zoom and I'm not going to do this ever again. They didn't. They would be like, nope, it's my turn to work with Susan. I'm going to get her there. And if I'm not, I'm going to tap you, Andrew. So somebody was getting tapped because we are going to make sure Susan can do what everyone else can do. So that's just the way it was. And then the best part about allowing our staff people to use their expertise and strengths and is not only that we created this amazing new program, but you also retain your staff because they get to be passionate about what they want to be passionate about, even though I can't pay them what they're worth. So if you wanted to know how to use, and we do use Burlington English, so shout out to Burlington English. It's been, thank goodness we started using that before COVID. So Burlington English is one of the programs that we use. If one of our staff people needed to learn Burlington English or know something about Burlington English, you call Debbie. If you need to really pump up your coaching skills, you call Andrew. He is our expert on coaching. He does amazing coaching programs and activities with his students to get them to, it's like he's out there on that court just cheering them on. And so it's really great what he can do with that. And if you're just like, my class is so boring, even I'm bored out of my mind, then you call Rebecca, and Rebecca is going to help you infuse fun in your program. So Becky and I didn't need to be those experts. The other staff did, and they shared their expertise. That culture of collaboration, they got it online. And I mean, they went online with that culture of collaboration and they worked through it through COVID. And people were constantly meeting in pairs or small groups to brainstorm ideas, work through issues, practice new skills. Every Thursday, we'd talk about what they did, what they didn't do, what their obstacles were. And then we'd go back with our plan for the next week and they'd do that. Best part about that, if you're a director, they did not need their boss to help them do their job. I was just their sounding board and their resource, nothing more. I was not in any of those meetings. I think it was probably better that I wasn't in any of those meetings. Otherwise, they might do what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do might not have been the best thing. So as March slid into April and then June and then August, we wondered if we were onto something. Were we really saying that we needed to stop providing classroom-based instruction? Because we went back in the fall. I don't know if everybody else did, but come August, schools reopened in South Dakota. We all went back to work in the classrooms. So we were all back at work, but we're like, we hadn't transitioned our students back. And so in August, we're like, so are we saying we really don't need this anymore? Can we stop the classroom-based instruction at all 5 of our locations and switch our instructional mode to synchronous online instruction? And would it work? The way we were using our staff as an organizational staff rather than a site-based staff really made all the difference on that, I think. And it was financially, it was a good move. I think it was a great move for our students and for our staff. I'm going to say there were tears. It was hard for a lot of our staff. It was sometimes hard for our students. Now, do our students still come in the building? Yes. Becky's going to talk about that. All those things were still happening? Yes, but in a different way. So now I'm going to ask Becky to come on up here because I didn't forward this. And this is a really long video. In 2020, we were up for our state review. And the state's like, well, we're not coming to your hotbed of hell. So you better figure out a way to show us what you're doing and justify your funding. And so not to do anything in half measures, we created a 40-minute video, which we are not showing you, that showed our teachers and our students, our administration, what we were doing and the process we were going through, not realizing it was the blueprint for the manual of what to do next. So I'm going to let Becky go from here.
Okay, we're going to play this video. It's about 4 minutes. Hang in there with us.
Started, I didn't want to do it. I was a horrible online teacher. I felt boring and monotone, and my students seemed confused and bored. If they even showed up at all. Most times they didn't. I'd have 1 or 2 pop in. I am a teacher that likes to make personal connections with my students, and it just wasn't there through a computer screen.
When the pandemic began, my face-to-face students didn't want to have class on Zoom. because most of them have phones or tablets, and it was just too hard, they thought. After a month or so, we got them to try Zoom. They liked being able to see each other again and visit and have a real class, and we've been Zooming ever since. I had students asking when we would have face-to-face instruction for many months. Now they don't even ask about the possibility. They're home with small children, they have no need for a sitter, they have no need for transportation. So I believe they've settled in and like the advantages the Zoom instruction allows.
Another way of dealing with student challenges that's changed is sometimes it's not just me helping the student. If a student is enrolled in Rebecca's social studies class and Karen's math class and Karen T's reading class, and she's a Yankton student, then that's 4 teachers who are helping with those challenges. So that's something new and something that I like.
Work has definitely changed since March. So much of my time is now spent on Zoom or phone calls with students, teaching them how to install or use Zoom, or how to use the Burlington English app on their phone or computer. Some students have a lot of technology issues and need help figuring them out. The funny thing is that I have never been very good at technology, so I am learning with the students, but we are figuring it out together.
I like teaching online because I get to specialize in a couple areas instead of all of the areas. So I teach reading, primarily essay, and science. I don't need to worry about social studies. I don't need to worry about math. When I'm prepping some of those science activities, the reason I'm able to do so in a way that students can be interactive on the computer is because I'm not also trying to find, get math stuff prepared. I'm also not getting these other things prepared. So focusing on 1 or 2 areas has been very nice. I can really spend time looking at what the GED indicators are, what people are missing most often on the test, and kind of step up the instruction that I'm doing.
I started using Google Classroom with my students, and this seems to also give them some sort of that support network that they need, because they chat with each other, and I see my students keeping each other motivated.
I also have a student with 3 young daughters that she's raising by herself. She could not have brought them to class. I would not have allowed that. And it can be a little hectic even in Zoom, but she has learned a lot about muting her Zoom when she's not speaking. So she's gained some tech skills, and we have gained a fantastic student that comes almost every single day without fail. So that is a real triumph. We're extending our reach to people that we couldn't before.
I think that the online classes have been really beneficial for students. I think we have a better schedule that we can offer them. Our earliest GED class starts at 8:30 in the morning, and our latest starts at 6 in the evening. So, classes are almost going on 12 hours a day.
We are reaching people who could not attend class before. For example, students with transportation issues, students who can't find childcare, students who live a little too far from the office. They can now attend class from their homes. I've been able to complete intakes and have classes with students in Chamberlain or Armour, for example. I think before those students might not have attended class because they would have had to drive too far.
I also enjoy the friendships being made between students from different towns. It brings a bit of variety to the classroom. I actually think the changes to our program are really good.
So how did we get there, right? From crying and gnashing of teeth to we think this is a good thing. It was a process. And I'm going to take you through just a really kind of short and condensed version of that process this morning and the rest of our time together. So fortunately, as Kim said, we had been involved in STAR reading, and as part of the Star Reading program, we had been through a systemic change process before. Anybody else undergone systemic change before in your program? I'm seeing a few hands in the room. Systemic change is transformational change, right? You're making modifications to policies, procedures, mindsets, administrative structures to hopefully have something sustainable at the end. And we're really looking at identifying and correcting those root causes of underlying issues in an organization. So you can see the 6 stages of systemic change on the screen. Most of the time we exist in stage 1 as we go about our work the way we always have, and we might not realize that we're propping up a system that's no longer effective. At some point, multiple people become aware that there's a problem, things aren't working that they should. Kim said, we would stand around and say, things could be better. What can we do? That's stage 2. We knew something wasn't quite right. We couldn't quite put our finger on it yet. That's that awareness. Once you recognize that change is needed, you start to try new things, usually on a small scale or in an isolated situation. For us, the exploration stage happened all at once everywhere because of the pandemic. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it's also sometimes not a bad thing to have to do those things. I'm seeing some nodding in the room, right? The transition stage happens when you reach critical mass of people who are willing to commit to the new system. This is a hard place to get a lot of times, but this is usually also when you start to see change because people are really willing to take some risks at stage 4. As the change state takes hold, you start to develop that new infrastructure to support the new processes. This can be changes in policies, materials, staffing, scheduling, marketing. And then finally, the new system becomes the norm, and it's hard to remember the way you used to do things. And that's the true end result of real systemic change. If you don't remember how it was before, or you can't imagine going back to that. Right? It all sounds pretty straightforward when you just condense it down into about a minute and a half, right? It's painful. One problem with systemic change is you're addressing systemic issues which are really deeply embedded in us, and we might not even recognize that we're perpetuating the problems we're trying to solve. We fight internally to maintain components of the old system. And we rarely progress through these levels in a linear way. We bounce back and forth as we're going through this process. So it isn't as neat as it looks on a slide, right? When we talk about implementing any kind of complex change, we know we have to overcome resistance to change. Even those of us who really fully embrace change in a lot of ways still pull back sometimes. We don't want to take those final steps to enact the change. So why is that? As Kim mentioned, for many years, I was actually part of the National STAR project team. I led many groups in many states through the process of making complex systemic change to the way they teach reading. One of my favorite resources to use was called Competing Commitments. I loved it. It was really an effective tool to use. And I kind of got into the research behind it, which led me to this book. The title is up on the screen there, which you've got in the copies of the slides that you have access to. It's called Languages for Transformation, How the Way We Talk Can Change the Way We Work. Robert Keegan and Lisa Laskow-Leahy. It really provides a roadmap to the reasons, I guess I will say, why we're reluctant to make those big changes. And the way we hang on to the way we've always done things. I grew up in a small town, in a small school. We've never done it that way before. It was like my least favorite phrase in the entire world. I've carried that with me through the rest of my life. And why is it that people get stuck in that? The authors of this book call that our dynamic equilibrium. And I like that phrase a lot. So we've kind of used this method in various formats every time we've made a big change. So I'm gonna kind of walk you through, sorry, I'm Kim, all of a sudden I didn't change my screen. Here's the book, sorry. I'm gonna walk you through a very shortened version of how to do this, okay? Using the tools from the book. So this is the part where y'all work. I want you to think about this. What sorts of things, if they were to happen more frequently in your work setting, would you experience as being more supportive of your ongoing development? Do not think about what's realistic. This is a wish list, right? Don't edit because you think it might not happen. My boss is sitting right there. I can tell you I've wanted things that could not happen before, and she's made them happen. If it's easier, you can think of negative things that if they happened less would support your growth. And I'm going to open up a poll, try and get rid of my controls here so that y'all can see and we'll see your answers. It's all anonymous, so nobody will know it's you. Yeah, I know. I was trying to get them to minimize. These are great responses. I'm laughing at the red tape is yellow, just because I watch a lot of true crime and yellow tape's never good, you guys. But I agree about the red tape. These are such good responses. I'm going to ask you to keep going, right? And to hang on to these because we're going to work with them going forward too. So single path to graduation. Okay, wow. Can I just tell you, I'm going to go back and read all of these again after this session because they're all so good. Thank you so much for contributing. So when we do this activity, often the answers to this question are framed in a very particular language form. And it's familiar to all of us. It's the language we use to complain, right? Now, complaining is not necessarily productive. Usually what results from complaining is more complaining, right? It's contagious. But there's a positive core to complaining about work that can really be cultivated when you're working on making complex change. Evaporation of territorialism. Gosh, it's early in the morning, which is totally a word. I agree. I hate to navigate away from this one, but I want to keep us kind of on time. So you don't complain about things unless you care about them, right? You complain if you are passionate about something. So instead of feeling bad about complaining, take another look at your answer and ask yourself what commitments or convictions that you hold are implied in your response. And there are probably multiples that would apply here, but just pick the one you feel most strongly about. And a good way to do this is to complete this sentence. I am committed to the value or importance of what? I don't know. And now I can't make my slide go. There we go. And now it's in the way again. As you answer, I'm going to tell you in the materials for this presentation that you have access to from the QR code, You're going to find a set of graphic organizers that walk you through this process. So you'll see all of the prompts that we're working through on those graphic organizers as well. You all could work at Cornerstones. You ever decide you want to relocate to a small South Dakota town? You have our contact information. If you go to our website, there's an application online. Again, amazing answers. So good. Oh, why? Oops. There we go. So by definition, the commitments that you're still hopefully typing aren't yet fully realized, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have had a complaint that spawned them. So how can we develop them? When we worked through this process, this was a pretty common response. It mirrored a lot of the responses that I was seeing on the screen that you all were typing in. Our staff is committed to providing high quality educational services to our students, and that passion is admirable, right? We want to honor it as we make complex change. We're not ignoring the complaints that led us to this conviction, right? In fact, we're using them to define what we really truly care about. The beauty of this is when we look at the commitment rather than the complaint, we don't have to fix the complaints. We just have to achieve the commitment. And we're not ignoring the complaints. Nobody feels like we're leaving their ideas out or their problems out. We're saying, okay, we recognize those problems. We see that it leads to this commitment. Let's make this commitment happen. It's a far more positive way of looking at complaints that people have about their jobs. So as leadership, it frees us up to do that. But we also need to think about our internal language of complaint. The way we talk to ourselves is almost more important than the way we talk to each other, right? Instead of focusing on the things that are wrong and seeing ourselves as martyrs to them, right? Oh, I wish it could be some other way, but I just have to carry on, right? Do you work with those people? We have a lot of them in our organization. I love them, but it makes me crazy. Or worse, just ignoring all the negative thoughts that we have because we don't want to ignore those things. They lead us to the things that have to change, right? We need to use them. We can use those complaints. This is a great quote from the book by Keegan and Leahy. The language of complaint essentially tells us and others what it is we can't stand. The language of commitment tells us, and possibly others, what it is we stand for. So by shifting from complaint to commitment, it's a real shift in our mindset. So it's human nature when we realize our commitments aren't being fully realized to figure out who's to blame, right? Who's holding us back from reaching our full potential? You can probably list a lot of people and things that are doing that, but is your name on that list? Because we all engage in behaviors that hold us back from change. So our next question is, what are you doing or not doing that's keeping your commitment from being fully realized? Oh, you guys are being so honest and I love you. This is a hard question to answer. They get harder as we go, right? Oh, No, I won't. No, but it just hurt me because, you know, we've all done it. Oh, focusing on what I can't do instead of what I can. That is an amazing answer. We all do it, don't we? We all do it. Again, keep typing because I'm going to look forward to going back to these and read them all at some point. Not sure why I can't get this to forward. There we go. So what we just did can take the form of a story you tell about yourself, right? It's kind of like telling on yourself for holding on to practices that aren't really furthering your cause. So when we started looking at the difference in our program and class offerings virtually versus face-to-face, we could see what we needed to do. But for many of our teachers, this was not an easy fix, right? So they had a hard time, I have a hard time putting this someplace where I need it. They had a hard time letting go of some of those behaviors for a lot of different reasons. So these are some of the things that we would hear, right? And we had to work through the process of figuring this out. And as Kim said, there were tears. There were really hard conversations. One of the worst was talking about if we're going to fully level our classes, you have to let go of the students who were in your geographic class, who were your favorites, if you're not teaching the level that they're in. Our teachers were really reluctant to do that. It was a difficult meeting. So we go through these internal gyrations to maintain that dynamic equilibrium that we're in, right? One key here is you can't use these issues and treat them as problems to be fixed, right? Because you want to learn from these behaviors. Oh, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, they can probably hear the booms. I don't know, they were loud. So if you immediately started writing a to-do list to help you stop doing these things that you just realized you're doing, don't do that, right? Put that away. You're treating these behaviors like you got caught being naughty and you didn't. Look at the last example here. Loving their students and wanting to keep them in their class is not a negative behavior of our teachers, right? The fact that they love their students and are dedicated to them is a positive for us. We don't want them to change that. But I think a lot of times, if you look at the answers that you gave back here, there's an element of fear underlying them, right? We're essentially afraid of messing things up. And I think that that's often part of us. Saying I have a fear of failure is like saying I have brown eyes or I have a bad back. It just becomes a part of us. So we feel like we have to carry on with it instead of moving away from it. So we can take a better approach to resolving those fears, though. Instead of accepting that it's a part of us, we can consider the fact that we're actively working to keep the things we're afraid of from happening. We see this with our GED students, don't we? They finish those first 3 and then they self-sabotage before they get number 4. They're more afraid of what comes after than they are of the present. We do the same thing. We hold these types of competing commitments without realizing that we're actively working to avoid making a change because of them. So we need to work at rephrasing those fears as a commitment. So what might you also be committed to doing? What is your fear telling you that's at odds with the commitment you're trying to achieve? So you might also be committed to what? Oh, sorry. It was easier on my big screen at home, y'all. Can't they just set them down instead of throwing them on the floor? So you might also be committed to what? Avoiding that fear. This one's harder, right? Oh, yep. Again, keep typing. I'm going to move us forward. Maybe. Okay. So you may also be committed to what? The authors tell us if you're a bit put off by your answer to that question, you're doing a good job here because you're really naming forms of self-protection, right? So what else might you be committed to? These are some of the things that our staff came up with when we asked them this question. Once you're able to address your underlying competing commitments, you can really start to do the work that you need to do. And what happens is your competing commitment is a mirror image of your original commitment, right? Your original commitment tells you the things that you want to do. The competing commitment contains the things that you're afraid might arise of byproducts if you're trying to achieve it. I think of the competing commitment as that internal voice that we all have that says, if you're wrong, everything will be messed up and everyone will know that it was you who ruined it, right? It's that fear that holds us back. And there's nothing wrong with that because it keeps us from making bad mistakes. But we also need to see that this competing commitment holds us back from achieving our eventual goal, right? And if you read your answers backwards here, suddenly everything makes sense. Because you hold this competing commitment, you engage in those protective behaviors that you listed before, and that's why you can't achieve that original commitment. Make sense? So we need to find a way to look at these commitments in a different way to get rid of them. So part of the problem with competing commitments is we hold them so close that they become our reality. We don't see that a change that we're contemplating could result in something bad. We think it most assuredly will result in something bad. And because of that, we act to protect ourselves. So we make these assumptions that we see as truth, right? We need to find a way to separate our assumptions. Let me put it to you this way. You're going to use your answer to the previous question to complete this sentence stem. I assume that. So if there's a negative in your competing commitment, then remove it. For example, if my competing commitment said, I'm committed to not looking incompetent, right? Oh, sorry. I'm committed to not looking incompetent. Then my sentence stem, I could complete it by saying, I assume that if I looked incompetent, then the next step would be to answer as quickly and honestly as you can. How would I feel then? So I assume that if I looked incompetent, then everyone would lose respect for me and I would have no credibility, right? So let's carry that through. Not an answer that I pulled out of the hat, FYI. Oh, it's from this last one, from that competing commitment. So, sorry. You might be committed to the negative thing that you think might come out of the change, the fear that you're holding because of that change. Sorry, good question. Thank you. I told you they were going to get harder, right? Yeah, yeah. Not necessarily in the most linear fashion, right? Yeah. Oh, if I can't help my students right away, they'll be lost forever. We've heard that one. Yeah, yeah. Oh, see, you all are still being so honest, and I so appreciate it. I so appreciate it, because these are real true fears, right? And we hold them close enough, the assumptions that we hold them close enough that they take root there and they direct our actions. If I implement this change, it'll be too much mental workload for me to manage. Yeah. So these answers look like our own personal doomsday prophecies, right? They should. That's what we're trying to get at. But when you look at it rationally, can you see it probably represents an outcome that isn't realistically going to occur? Maybe yes, maybe no, right? But we operate in a way that we show that shows that we believe it's true. We see our world through these lenses, right? So when you again go backwards from this assumption and this fear and look at that competing commitment and look at those behaviors that we engage in, we can see why we're stuck. We can see where that dynamic equilibrium comes from. It comes from this place of fear that's so deep rooted that it changes the way we see our world. So usually when we engage in problem solving activities, we start by articulating a goal and vision, and we recognize the things that we're doing to keep us from getting that. And at that point, we stop digging. And that's why we don't get results, because we stop at step 2 and we don't go through the rest. You've done some hard work here though, right? You've gotten all the way to an inner contradiction and a big assumption. So that has to lead you to some kind of transformative change, right? Maybe, because these are big things that you just articulated, and it's easy to leave them in that pile on the corner of your desk, right? Because it's hard to tackle them. But there are some things we can do to get past the big assumptions. I'm not just going to leave you hanging, right? Here are some things that we can do. Here's the answer key. We want to look at our big assumptions rather than through the lens of them. The first step is just noticing them. For a couple of weeks, review your big assumption every day and keep track of what does and doesn't happen as a result of it. I used people thinking I was incompetent as an example earlier, right? If I make a mistake, do people actually treat me like I'm incompetent and I don't know what I'm doing? They don't. I make mistakes all the time. They're very forgiving and gracious of me. Do I change the way I behave in meetings, like not giving input or anything in meetings because of that belief? Maybe, maybe not. Noticing can help you identify what you're doing because of that big assumption. Then you look for experiences that make you doubt your big assumptions. Kim mentioned one of the things that happened when we opened our offices back up is students came back into the building for class. They used our computer labs and classrooms to access the technology to get online. And students would typically stay in the office for a couple of weeks and then they'd leave the office, not class, right? They would go home because it's easier to come from home. They'd get comfortable with Zoom and they'd say, oh, I can do this from home. Okay, I'll see you. And they'd stop coming into the office. It's hard to tell ourselves that students need to come into the office when they tell us they don't want to come into the office, right? Next, we look at the foundations of our assumptions, okay? The foundations for our beliefs about what education should look like run back a couple hundred years, don't they? They've been supported by policies and paradigms that rotate through every few years. One of the conversations we had was that COVID fundamentally changed the way we all see our world, and technology played a big part in that. So we could see our assumptions differently in that context. And then finally, and I think this is the one that speaks to educators the most, run a pilot, right? Start with a small, relatively safe test, make some changes, see what happens. Do all your students disappear? Are all your teachers suddenly unable to teach? If not, widen the pilot. If things aren't quite right, tweak. We've been tweaking for 5 years now. We're still tweaking. it's an iterative process, right? You're not going to get through it in a couple of months. It's going to take some time, but it's worth the work. I'm here to tell you. And one of the best ways to crush our big assumptions, in my opinion, is data. So if we go back to those same data sets that we started with, our number of students went up. This is from 23-24, right? We served 29% more students. Our retention rate increased by 4%, even with that larger number of students. Our performance stayed the same. Our demographics stayed relatively the same. Our percent of English language learners stayed the same. Even more of them somehow were at beginning levels, which was crazy. So that was, you know, it was a positive gain there is what we were seeing, because our retention rate went up, even though our number of students went up. We were able to get our waves of English language learners at those lower levels into classes. We did not have to start waiting lists. Here's a big difference in GED. We're now able to offer GED prep classes in multiple subject areas over almost a 12-hour period through the day. We're much more targeted in our approach to the classes we offer. You'll notice there's a math class at every part of the day, because that's what most of our students need. And as you heard in the video, our teachers are able to specialize in the subjects that they're teaching, so their prep time is condensed. We increased the number of GED prep students we serve, and we had a 66% increase in the number of GED subtests passed, and our number of GED credentials doubled. And here's, I think, one of the biggest differences. We talked about leveling, right? We are fully leveled in our English language classes. And you'll see the afternoon is not as much, but we have the fewest students in our afternoon levels. They're all morning or evening, basically. When we had waves of very basic English language learners come in, we were able to move staff around and stand up additional basic level classes in the evening where most of our students come in. It would not have happened in the model that we had before. We weren't always happy with our student teacher ratio, but we did the best we could. The other thing that happens is we have the ability, the fluidity to change classes in the middle of the year too, which is nice. So what's next? As Kim said, we're continuing to grow and expand our service area. We're making iterative change. We continue to tweak and look at what needs to be adapted. We're using our data and our staff input for that. And our next logical step is going more hybrid. We want to do that well when we do it. So we're taking a measured approach towards it. Any questions as we wrap up? I know we're a little bit over. I appreciate your input and your time so much. Huh? Oh, aren't we? Oh, okay, great. I thought we were out. Any questions, either in the room or online? Yes, ma'am. Yep.
First, congratulations on the progress you all made. I'm curious how you got students to learn how to use all the technology. Was there someone who just like enrolled people in the first week, was just getting people's internet working, or how did the onboarding look for new students?
Initially during COVID, we actually had people, all they were doing was helping people find internet. You know, that was like a huge obstacle, because like the school sent home the tablets and the computers for their students. Like, great, they don't have internet. You know, so that was a huge thing that Shane just spent all the time doing. Students still struggle. We encourage them as part of orientation. We do individual orientation, even with 825 students and a staff of 12 full-time people. So that we do a lot of orientation that way and troubleshooting that way. We encourage those who can to start in the office, one of the offices. But, you know, like they were mentioning Chamberlain, they're like, okay, you have no reference for Chamberlain. A lot of our students are coming from about 120 miles from a site location. So they're not going to drive in. So yeah, we do a lot of troubleshooting. I am friends with every library in our region. I utilize our resources a lot. Almost every student is totally capable and has access to a phone. That's a smartphone. And we don't give them credit for that. It's not the best way to take class. We don't
think necessarily, but it is a way to take class. And so a lot of them start on their phone and maybe graduate to a tablet or a computer.
Are you required to do pre-testing for your students? And if you had 100% virtual, how did you manage that?
Oh, you can do that. I can't. No, we do.
Yeah. And actually the pandemic helped with that too, right? Because all of a sudden they were saying we could do best tests online. We could do, we had the remote TABE. We are TABE and best in South Dakota. We actually, I think a lot of our teachers prefer to do online assessments at this point, and a lot of the students do too. And again, we had some specialists at the beginning who got very good at doing those assessments online. One of the advantages that we've found actually is in our post-test rate. It has also gone up because in the times that we have the majority of our students, we've actually scheduled so that we can have a couple of, we call them floaters. They can fill in and be subs if they're needed, but they also can just like go into any class and post-test any person who's ready for a post-test. So it does take some practice and some time, but yes, it can be done. Okay, so that question was how do they actually do it? Because a lot of the beginners online only have a phone. We do tell them that it's easier. I mean, our English language learners, they can do a Best Plus online on a phone. The thing that makes it hard is the pictures, you know, when they have a picture queue, but they manage it. The TABE test, no, cannot be done on a phone. So then those students, we use those library contacts, we use school district contacts in areas where they can't come into a physical office, and we help them that way. It's not perfect, but it works.
Also, our local Department of Labor offices, they will set up a TABE there. For a while, they were locked into a system that didn't allow them to, but now they went and made some purchases for some computers outside of that system that allow them to do it. One of the persons online asked if we have full-time staff. I am a very fortunate director, and I know an exception. I do have 12 full-time, 12 full-time staff and 10 very part-time staff, like less than 10-hour-week staff. I will say though, the majority of my full-time staff, because I'm a nonprofit, I have my own little world, and we do a lot of income generating programs as well. So most of my teachers are not full-time adult ed, they're part-time adult ed and then part-time income generating. So we sell their services. We get fee-based. So that's how we do that. That was one of the questions online. Other questions? Let's go check. Okay, you checked it? Okay. Oh, here's some.
Is all of your curriculum teacher created, especially if you have part-time staff?
For ESL, we use Burlington English, and no, I don't get a kickback, but if you go to the account, you tell them South Dakota sent you, because dang, I've sent enough people there. We do use that for Burlington English as our core curriculum, and then teachers incorporate their own personality and student needs and what's happening in their communities into the curriculum as a support. GED, a whole nother game. And none of my very part-time teachers are GED teachers. ESL, easy to make Burlington their program, but not in ESL.
And I think one of the things, not in GED, yeah, I think one of the things that you heard from our GED teachers in the video as well was the fact that they can specialize in a subject or two really opened up for them the ability to dig in and develop things that were useful online. We use a lot of other tools there. The CK12 materials are great online, and a lot of our teachers use those for at least part of their curriculum.
The Adult Numeracy Initiative, we're heavy into that. That curriculum adapted very well to online learning, believe it or not. Is there another question? Oh yeah, City University for Math is another one they use. They just use a little bit of everything, but it would be impossible for a, less than 10-hour week teacher to be able. It would be asking. I would never ask that. I'm not saying it was impossible. I would never ask that of a teacher. Okay, we have another online question. I would love to answer it if I could get the stupid screen to stay. Nope, that's not a question. Any other questions? Love to talk with more people. If there's people that are doing parts of this or all of this or something different than this, I'd love for you to reach out to us, because we're going to continue to grow this. It's in the current state of what's happening in our world, I see this as a viable option for sustainability. And so that's another reason we're doing it. And it's funny because a lot of these teachers on here were saying like, well, and I never have to do math. The most amazing math teacher is the one that never did math before. She's incredible now. And the one that's, I don't do tech, the sweet one. She's not sweet. She is an amazing tech teacher now. She can troubleshoot anything with a student in almost any language. And we work with 17 languages right now. So we're not lingual. We do not have people who can translate in all those languages, and she does it. She works it. Other questions?
I know when I go home from a conference, right, you're going to get so much information. This is only the first session. You're going to get so much information dumped on you over the next few days. And I know you get home, you start looking through your notes and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that question, or I want to know more about this, or I just don't remember what this meant. You've got our contact information on the slides, on the card that we gave you. You've got those handouts. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I know that it can sometimes feel awkward after a conference too, to reach out to a presenter and be like, hey, can you just talk to me about this one more time? We love what we do and we're passionate about this change. So we would be happy to visit with anybody who wants to know more, or who wants to just visit a little bit more about what you're doing in your program and how it might relate to what we're doing in our program too. So just really want to encourage you, if you have that urge, don't edit yourself from reaching out and having a conversation. Yes, thank you so much for your attention today, everybody. You were wonderful. Appreciate it so much.